Hey cultists, how are we all doing? So this is what I've painted this week. I've managed to do pretty much all the other details that were remaining on the model. So it's going to be black, it's going to be silver non-metallic metal, and it's going to be gold non-metallic metal. So yeah, I'll talk about it more at the end, but I'm so happy with how this model's looking. So let's begin the tutorial and we can see how we achieve all of this. So really we're going to be painting all of the other details apart from the face, and most of them are going to be black or some kind of metallic. So we have this kind of shoulder armor here, which has this nice swoop around to render, so that's going to be the main thing to deal with, and as it turns into the light when we change direction. So we have two things to deal with: the scoop shape, and then also as we turn here it comes more into the light. And it's the same with this part here around the neck. I'm not sure if I painted it exactly the same or a different material, but we have the swoop downwards and we have the fact that this part is in the light. Then we have some simple details like the grenade wire and the weapon, and I think these will stay pretty simple. I'm also not using a plain background. I have my actual desk here, you can see, and this is an experiment to see if the colours show up better, because sometimes I have issues getting the colours right and it being light or dark enough. So I'm just trying this out and we'll see how it looks. So I think my plan is to paint this element here in a black, this part as silver in non-metallic metal, and then as we turn to the back we'll do the same thing. So I think I'll have these parts as black, but then the kind of vents as silver, and then yeah, there's just a lot of little black elements and rivets to do throughout the model, but it's going to look really great after this stage because it's going to be finished apart from the face, and that's going to finish it off super nicely. So we're going to use dark grey and neutral grey for both the silver and the black, and we're going to just add in some slight variation to separate those. I really like these paints though, just because of their coverage and the finish. I really like them. I use them all the time. For the black, I'm going to use ivory or this pale blue just to add to the neutral grey and make it brighter, but that's basically going to be the recipe for the black. Now for the silver, to give it some variation, I'm going to use a bluer grey in the midtones. And I've got two of these paints here. I'm not going to use both. I'm just showing you because it doesn't really matter which one it is, or any kind of bluish grey. I'm going to use blue pale just because it makes me laugh that it says blue twice. I'm a simple man, and there you go. So that's the recipe for the silver. And we're also going to add a little ivory, and that's going to be able to help us make it much brighter than the black, and that's how we'll separate the two. So this is my actual palette for painting the silver, and it's very messy and horrible, so what I'm going to do is start a fresh palette and mix up all the colours for you so you can see how we're going to make them. So on the palette I have the dark grey and the neutral grey applied, and my dropper bottles failed, so it took me ages to get these on the palette, so that's why we've skipped to here. And then I'm just adding the blue pale. Like I said, any grey with a bit of blue in is cool. And then the pale blue there, I'm adding a couple blobs of that. You can see it's called pale blue, but it's just this silvery grey. And then we have the ivory, which is a warm off-white. So these are the colours that we're going to use. And now I'll show you the little mixes. So for the black, we're going to do dark grey, neutral grey, and then add little bits of pale blue to the neutral grey until we get a bright enough highlight. It's probably not going to go to pure pale blue, because that is very bright, and we want there to be a big difference between the silver non-metallic metal and the grey. So the mid-tone for the silver will be the blue with a touch of neutral grey in, And then what we'll do is mix blue. That's going to be fun to say throughout the whole video, isn't it? And little bits of the pale blue. So you can see it does look very blue in comparison to that neutral grey. I know it's called neutral grey, but to my eyes, it looks a very warm grey, and that's the reason why I'm using it. And if we need an extreme colour, then we'll add some ivory to the pale blue. And then you can see those 5 blobs on the bottom there for the silver are going to be very different to our black recipe, basically. Both starting with dark grey and neutral grey, but going off in very different directions. And they're going to have very different values and volumes. But we'll see that in the rest of the video. So we're beginning to paint the black here and painting that large shoulder guard. I'm not sure what it's called. And what we're going to do is with dark grey, leave a little bit of black at the top where it hits that extreme shadow. And this is a really prime example of using our brushstroke direction. So every brushstroke is going to move downwards, and that's very easy to do on this shape just because it's so wide. You can see it's easily accessible, so it is possible to pay attention to our brushstroke. Here I move to the tip, as you can see, just to work around that eye, which I'm thinking I'm going to do gold. And then I'm turning to the top, and that top part I think is going to be all dark grey because that's definitely going to catch some light. So I'll just leave pure black in the top basically. This part's going to be the silver, so I think I'll paint all of that, including the shadow, dark grey. I can always add some black if I want more contrast, but I'm thinking base all of the silver in the dark grey. Everything at this point is going to get some kind of dark grey on it, so I'm going to just work around the details, just like this grenade here, and that's going to get a dark grey highlight. So I'm just going to work around the model and show you how I render the various parts. So the gun here, the part that faces down, that's definitely going to be dark, and I think everything that faces up on this gun is going to have some dark grey. You can see that big flat surface. That needs to all be a little bit lighter than black, just because, you know, it's facing up, and I think if it's plain black it won't work. Whereas the underside there, that's going to be pure black, I think. So I'm going to highlight the bottom of this. So like I said, I'm going to leave some bits pure black, but for the underside of the shuriken catapult, it's just going to get this dark grey highlight. Really nice and simple. It is the shadow, so we don't have to do too much to it, but I do want to render it a little. It's quite hard to see, but hopefully you can just see how nice the dark grey looks with that black shadow. So just a subtle difference, but I think this is enough for a shadow area. We've put some attention into it, but it shouldn't be too light. Once you've picked everything out with dark grey, I'm going to do a mix of neutral and dark grey. And I can again use this for both the silver and the black parts at this stage. Eventually they're going to go their separate ways and different recipes, but for now we can still use this mix for both. So you can see me picking out all those surfaces that face upwards because I know they're going to have some light. For the silver, it's base coating the whole thing, and for the black areas, I'm just starting to highlight it a little more. I think the top's going to be that bright, but then here, where it flares out almost to horizontal, I'm going to add just a little bit of this highlight. So I talked too much, had to reload my brush there. So this is neutral grey and dark grey, and I'm trying to do a subtle, large highlight for the black areas. This part here, the armour, it's so big that it does need this kind of rendering. Where there's smaller, more detailed parts of black, you don't need to do those big kind of area highlights. This centre part of the shuriken catapult, I think I'm going to do silver, I want it to be pretty stealthy and black, but I think I need a little separation. So yeah, this separate part, as you can see, I based the whole thing because that'll be silver. And I'm also going to do that for the vents. So this, I'm going to start to create a highlight that follows that kind of cylinder shape. So everything's going to follow the same kind of stages. It's just going to have different shape highlights depending on the part. Now with pure neutral grey, I'm going to work on the silver. And for the silver parts, I'm going to still be doing area highlights or large volume kind of highlights. Neutral grey is actually going to be an edge highlight for the black. So we'll come to that later, but for now I'm still doing the kind of rough volume, so I'm going on the silver. Hopefully by, the end of this video, this makes more sense, but this process is designed to kind of make it simple where we use the same paints. This part on the wrist, I'm going to paint the entire part facing up with neutral grey, and that will separate those two angles. We've got a sharp angle change there. And then the vents on the back will get a large highlight on the right where the light source is facing, and then a small little highlight on the left. So we have a flat area here, which could just be one color because light's just going to hit that flat surface the same. But to make it a little more interesting, I'm going to do two little bands of light. And the top one is going to be a little bigger and a little brighter by the end of it. But yeah, I'm just going to build a little shiny kind of reflection. And that's to also help separate it between the matte black of the rest of the shuriken catapult and the silver band we're going to have in the middle. And it's just going to look like grey stone at this point, but I think when we get to the end and get to the brightest contrast, it will start to look more silvery. So you can see me adding another layer here after it dries, and that's me just building up and blending it. And you can see I work with one color for quite some time, and then when I reach the max opacity, then I hit up the edges too. And I'm starting to add quite tight highlights here to the bottom of the neck silvery armor bit. I should get some official names ready really, shouldn't I? And I'm going to start to add the blue into the mix now. So remember in the mixing video at the start, this is where I'm using the mix of neutral grey and the blue grey. Can't remember what it was called. The blue anyway. Best name for a paint ever. And so I'm back to the shuriken catapult. And actually it's really clear here to see the change in tone. You can see it's much bluer after I've gone over the top of it. So now I've added pale blue to the blue, and we're going to start to paint some finer highlights. So you can see I'm on the detail brush now, and I'm painting very small areas, painting little reflections and shiny bits, as well as edging around those nice shapes. What I'm going to do for this main light on the silver here is have a bright light in the corner, like a shiny point, and then do another kind of shiny point up here, trying to keep that in line with the circle on the chest. So you can see this second layer, I'm just going to exaggerate that and build up those 2 points which are going to be shiny. And you can see it's starting to look more silverish now. NMM never works until we do the final highlight because you need that bright contrast. So it always looks grey until you add that last bit, I find. So you have to be patient and a bit of faith at this point. So you can see me picking out like the rivet details and stuff and just adjusting all the lights there. But I love that shape with the drop to the shadow. That's really cool. So So all those different shapes around the top where it goes up and down, the kind of spiky parts, we're putting highlights in the bottom of the scoops, and that's where it's going to be perpendicular to the light. So for highlighting, we're going to add either ivory or highlight skin or kind of whatever to pale blue now, and this is going to form the final highlights. I'm going to use ivory because it's easier for you guys to get, and I also like the kind of warm yellow look. Okay, so pretty fine highlights now. So this takes my best concentration to get it neat on cam. You can see I'm just using the tip of the brush, trying to do very small marks now. You can see that brightness really adds a lot. I actually really enjoy doing this because you're just trying to be as fine as possible, and it always has high impact adding these bright highlights. So yeah, it's a nice stage to be at after all that hard work. So you can see me picking out all the edges and stuff too. So I'm going to do the same highlight to the shuriken catapult, and I'm actually going to do some small strikes or skinny lines, and that's going to build that kind of more brushed aluminium look. And it's actually a nice way to control the flow of the pigment because we're not going to get that brush stroke effect. So I just do a few highlight lines in that diagonal direction, and I hit up the edges too. That's starting to look a little bit shinier now. I've got ivory with a tiny bit of pale blue in now, and I'm doing very small final highlights. You could use pure ivory, but I don't think it's necessary. With just a tiny bit of the pale blue in, it kind of retains that grey look. And I think those last highlights there on the top really make it look more silver. So I'm obviously putting some more paint on my brush here and show you some more fine points. So you can see my face starting to get in the shot because I'm trying to get really close to the model to see these fine points. But hopefully you can see the pace and how careful I am applying these tiny, tiny highlights. There we go, that looks great on the top now. Very small little shiny points. Kind of got 3 little reflective bits here. I don't know if I like the look, maybe just 2 would be cooler. I might change that later. I did decide to change it, so I'm going to show you now. I just kind of take the previous highlight color and I'm going to just link these 2 little dots together. So you can see I just expand that kind of shape and it matches the highlight above, and I think it looks better actually. That's the thing about non-metallic metal, it's all about experimenting with different volume interpretations and different shapes of reflection. So that's me just tweaking it with the brighter color there. Yeah, I think that looks much better myself. So I've shown you all the steps for the silver, so now we're going to go back to the black, and we left the black with a neutral grey highlight. So now I've just taken some neutral grey with a little bit of that pale blue in, and I'm going to start adding brighter highlights, but only to certain areas. So you can see on the shuriken catapult, I'm just going to do that edge that's facing upwards, rather than the long one that goes downwards. And you can see me exaggerating just certain parts of the shuriken catapult. And that's so our edge highlights follow the light source, so they match up, but it also just exaggerates our effect. And I think this is the way to use edge highlights. For me, I don't like to just highlight the entire edge with the same brightness. We should define the edges, but also follow some kind of cool light source. So I just picked out that kind of gem thing here, and I can use the side of the brush to catch this part here. So flipping to this shieldy bit, again I've got the same color, which is neutral grey and pale blue, and I'm hitting up the edge, but you can see the shadow formed by the kind of dragon, so I'm just going to edge one part as it turns round. Also, I think the other part we've just painted looks really silver there, which is cool. And I'm using the side brush here just whenever I can. And that means I can get it nice and tight. And I've said it many times before, but the good thing is this way you don't need to edge highlight every single part with the super bright color. Now, the edges underneath this eye symbol were pretty horrible to do. So yeah, just pick out the bottom ones for that. And don't forget your little grenade, get the highlights on there. So this is a continuation of the last bit we highlighted, and just adding a little more pale blue. And you can see I'm just being more selective, doing finer points, just the corners and things like that. We've got to be really careful not to take the black too far, so it starts to meld in with the silver. But I think that's looking pretty cool actually, I'm pleased. Back to the shuriken catapult, and you can see nice little edge highlight. That looks fantastic on that part. Just that left hand side to match the light source. And even though it's just kind of plain black, this shuriken catapult, I think with just nice edge highlights it looks really cool. I actually think having it plain black is the way to go, because we've got so many colours going on this mini with the emerald that having as much black and neutral areas as possible will just help the other colours to shine really. But those edges look really great on the top of the gun, I think. And just picking out the top parts on the whatever that disc is. It's got the ammo in. The catapult holder. It's like a CD drive or something. And you can pick out all of the small rivets with this mix. You don't need to go through all the colours, just be nice and sharp with this bright highlight. So I thought I'd take a step back and show you how the miniature's looking so far. I think the main light in the centre there looks really great, and the little wrist part is looking cool as well. You can see when we take a step back, the black really does look different to the silver, especially in terms of that value, that brightness. But yeah, I really like how this has changed the look of the Mini so far. I think I like the Shuriken Catapult best just because of those little edge highlights on the top part. I think that's really cool. And you can see the vents on the back here following the same pattern as the armor around the collar. Just those bright lights at the top. They're actually really easy to do in comparison. So next we need to do these little ribby bits in black between there, and also the pipes and stuff. On this wrist it's important we include some blue violet because it's a silver part, it's going to reflect that purple cloak. So I've just got some of the blue violet here, and I added the tiniest bit of neutral grey just to kill the colour a little, and I'm going to edge highlight it with that. I think that's all it needs really. It doesn't need to be too elaborate, but just taking into account that it's facing the cloak is really nice. It's in shadow, so we don't need to be bright with it. But I think that top section's come out really cool. So for painting the ribbing in between the legs, it's going to be very simple really. We're going to highlight it first with neutral grey here, but we only need to highlight where we have the bright light, so it follows all of that. So there's no need to highlight all the way along nice and bright. And I can do the same for this little metal part in between the thigh as well. Then we just move up to our brighter highlight, which is neutral plus pale blue, and we're going to cover a smaller area. Just line it up with those highlights you did for the jade. I'm also going to add a jade reflection for the grenade. This should be subtle because it's not metallic, so just mix in some neutral grey to dull down the emerald. As you turn, you can see it's just a subtle little bit of green bouncing on it. Now moving swiftly onto the gold. We're going to be mainly using these colours here, and I've chosen these because they're nice increments, and it means we're really not going to have to do much mixing apart from a little ivory for the highlights with dark yellow. But if you've not done non-metallic metal gold before, I'm hoping that this is a nice introduction because it's not a complex recipe. So let's give it a go. I'm going to start very simply by base coating everything with Rhinox hide. Nice easy first step. If you've not tried non-metallic metal gold before, I do think it's easier doing small details like this because you don't need to focus on things like blending or anything like that. It's just about getting the colours right in the right place. If you have a really large area, it's actually much more difficult to get that shiny effect. So yeah, I'd love to know if you guys have never done gold non-metallic metal before, how you find this procedure. So the first highlight is going to be English Uniform, which is a fantastic colour you'll see me use for gold all the time. I'm going to be covering almost all of the area with this colour, just leaving really small areas of shadow. Another thing to note is I'm not diluting this much, and that's because it's not a very powerful colour. So to get it nice and solid, we want to dilute it almost to a minimum so it's smooth, but so we get the colour out of it. If it's over a lighter colour, it's fine, but over this dark Rhinox hide, yeah, we need to put it on reasonably thick. And you'll see what I mean once you try it. But yeah, like I said, we're just going around and doing a very, very big first highlight. Now we are moving to the next colour, which is green brown. And it's just like English Uniform, but a bit lighter. So we basically do the same thing, but cover a smaller area. You can see I'm doing a big highlight on the left of the skull, and that's so it matches the light source we have going on the chest. Basically, we're building up to a highlight that's going to be really bright on the left-hand side of the skull. And on the eye part, I'm going to paint sort of the lower half with this, maybe 50% with this colour. Actually, later on I adjust it, so make sure you just watch until the end. But I'm just building downwards on the eye to follow the black highlights. Next we have the dark yellow, which I've chosen specifically because it's kind of a greenish yellow. If you've got the pot, you'll see what I mean. But it's so nice to not have to do any mixes, just go through these different pots of paint. This is the step where it starts to look pretty gold. Hopefully you can see on the screen, to my eyes it is starting to feel gold. I've chosen these paints really carefully for their tones. I've never actually used this recipe before, but I could tell from doing gold so many times that it was going to produce the kind of greenish antique-y gold tone that I was looking for. You can see on the eye part now, I'm actually starting to do little highlights on the top. They're very tricky. And I just bring a little bit of the dark yellow to the very bottom of that eye. And then I highlight the very, very top. That part I'm definitely going to have to tighten up later, because that highlight needs to be really, really fine on the top of the eye. So I paint dark yellow a bit higher here, and this is actually a mistake which you'll see me change later. Final highlighting now, and we're starting to get the dark yellow and add little bits of ivory to it until we're happy. This is actually going to be one long continuous clip. I'm pretty much going to finish the gold now in this long 4-minute clip. So you can see on the left of the skull I paint quite a broad rounded shape highlight, so it's like a shiny dot on the top of the skull. Again, like I keep saying, it's to match our light source we have on the chest here. But I love the look of that. I mean, you could leave that there, but I will brighten it a little bit with a touch more ivory. I love that. That looks like a nice bit of shine there on the top of the head. So now I need to roll out that contrast on the rest of the gold. I hope that, you know, this feels kind of simple. for you guys. I hope you agree that it's not crazy difficult. Actually, with these details, the difficulty lies in doing the painting tight enough. So there's not a particularly crazy kind of theory or recipe to follow, but it is difficult to get the lines and the dots small enough. That's the challenge when doing non-metallic metal on small details like this. The blending part's eliminated, but we have to be fine. That edge highlight on the top of the eye, for me in particular, that's not fine enough. I'll need to go in with the Rhinox hide and tighten that up and make it skinnier. Here you can see me going back to English uniform, and I'm just bringing more mid-tone in. You can see that changes the feel really easily. So I had too much of the dark yellow, so I just erased that with some English uniform. And then I add a bit more highlight to the bottom. So the skull, I didn't really need to do any adjusting, but the eye, because it's a bit plainer, a bit wider, I needed to adjust the volume some more. This is actually the longest video clip continuously I've done for a tutorial. So yeah, it's 4 minutes continuous filming, but you can see how much I achieve in quite a small space of time, because we're just doing very fine little highlights, and it makes all the difference to the non-metallic metal. Just like the silver, those last few kind of bright lights make the difference. So with a touch more ivory, I add a very, very small highlight, and then I also go across the top of the skull. Loving the look of that now. On my screen it looks really shiny, and in the hand it looks fantastic as well. Painting the small highlights on just the lower portions of the eye sockets and the nose again follows our light source. It's like when we edge highlighted the Shuriken catapult, where we don't edge highlight the whole eye socket of the skull. It's just the bottom part, so it helps exaggerate the light source effect. And that's so important for non-metallic metals. So I'm just having another bash at doing a bright highlight at the top of the eye. I'm a little bit in the way here, but I think you'll understand what I'm doing. So there you have it. That's the gold on the skull done. And you can see how that highlight really matches up with the chest and the silver armor we did earlier. I love how the eye is looking amongst all the black. It makes the gold kind of pop. And yeah, I'm actually really stoked to get to this point in the miniature. Those little details we've done in this session have transformed the model, in my opinion, because it feels complete. Lots of little colours here, and the extra yellow from the gold. Yeah, it's standing out so nicely against that purple and green. Super happy. So that's actually it for this week's tutorial. We've done black, we've done silver, we've done gold, and you know what? I'm really loving the look of this model now. I think this session has transformed it because we've completed all those little details which I didn't think were going to be that important, but the mini looks great. We're going to paint the face and the base next time, and I'm really excited to put it together. I hope you've enjoyed these steps on doing non-metallic metal. I'd love to know your feedback on how you found the simple approach to non-metallic metal, especially if you've never tried it before. Looking forward to finishing it next week.